It used to be if you were making $100,000 a year or more, you were in the upper middle class and life was pretty easy for you. And that's just not the truth anymore here in 2025. I want to talk about why people are making sometimes as much as $150K a year and still living paycheck to paycheck. Welcome into the channel. My name is Tom. I'm the founder of Vertical Motion, where we help good people become great leaders. And we do this in a lot of different ways. We help people move up in the executive ranks from the professional ranks. So if you're someone that's at the mid-manager level, want to move to director or VP or above, we have a program to help with that. You can learn more about that in the link down below in the description. But today what I want to talk to you about is this idea, realizing that making $100,000 a year anymore just isn't quite cutting it like it used to. And I have some startling facts and figures to share with you. So first of all, let's talk about why six figures is not the standard anymore. It used to be back in the 1980s and even early 1990s, if you were making $100,000 a year, you had a really nice house, you had a really nice car, you could send your kids to a really nice school, you ate like kings, you went on vacations. That was normal back then. And I remember thinking like, wow, I can't wait till I make $100,000 a year. And I did start making that kind of money in the late 2000s. And it was great, but not as great as it would have been in the 90s. And it was actually closer to like 125, 130 that I started to feel like I was able to kind of live comfortably. So when I started making about that much money a year, 125, 130, this is like 2010, felt like that was good money to live on, right? A little bit less than that felt like I would have to give up some things. And a little bit more than that felt like I didn't need it. But so that was, you can see already just at 2010, 125, 130 was probably that cutoff point below which, you're struggling, above which you're kind of sitting with gravy. So now let's talk about what's happened over the last 10 years. And this is fascinating to me. I was looking at inflation numbers, and inflation is weird the way that it's reported. First of all, the way they break down inflation into these multiple categories, it kind of confuses what's really happening with the actual cost of living out of our pockets. But the reality is that since 2015, so between 2015 and 2025, the average inflation rate per year is about 2.9%. So what does that mean? That means that between 2015 and 2025, over that 11-year period of time, the aggregate inflation rate is 33.1%. Everything costs a third more than it did in 2015, just 10 short years ago. If you can remember back then, we had a very different world, certainly a different country, but things were 33% less expensive than they are now. And that's insane when you think about the average value of paychecks going up over that period of time is flat, zero, right? The average increase in income between 2015 and 2025 is zero. We make the same that we did back then. And that's why everything feels so much more expensive. I'll tell you, I love eating garbage food like Taco Bell and McDonald's, but I don't anymore because I go to Taco Bell and I get a Mexi Melt and it's $4. McDonald's is selling hash browns for $3. They used to be like a quarter not that long ago. And the reality is, I did a little bit of checking on this. It turns out that the inflation rate between 2012 and 2024 for fast food is over 300%. Food costs 3 times as much as it did back then. And now it's like, okay, that's why when I go to McDonald's and I get dinner for $4, it's $50. It's just it's not worth it. I like eating garbage, but I don't love it that much. For that amount of money, I can go to the grocery store and cook a nice steak dinner for all of us. So inflation has these areas that it hits people differently at different times, right? But generally speaking, overall inflation, 33% increase over the last 10, 11 years. The other number that was really interesting to me was the fact that 52% of Americans feel like they need to make $100,000 a year or more just to feel comfortable. Now think about that. It used to be $100,000 a year was the number that you had to hit to feel like you've made it. But now that's the number that people feel like they have to hit to just feel comfortable. And it makes sense when you step back and think about how inflation has changed the value of the US dollar over the last 10, 15, even 20 years and beyond. And so the frustrating part is that compensation has not kept up with inflation by a mile. And so this is the problem. Everyone at the bottom 90% is being squeezed more and more and more, and we're getting less and less and less for it. Now, there's a lot of socioeconomic stuff that we could talk about here, but I'm choosing not to. Instead, what I want to talk about next is what can you do about it? Let's say that you're someone making $100,000 a year. You're a program manager, you're a mid-level manager, you're someone that's kind of a good individual contributor, and you're making $100,000 a year. You're at that mid-career level. How do you make more? Well, there's a couple things you can do. One, you can go find companies that are paying higher salaries, but here's the catch. With all of the return to office mandates, finding those jobs will likely lead you to have to live in places that are more expensive than where you're living now. And so if you live in Green Bay, Wisconsin, the cost of living is going to be different than living in Silicon Valley, California. But the jobs in Silicon Valley pay more than they do in Green Bay. So you can see that you can make more money, but you can also increase your costs in the process. And the reality is that waiting for promotions is tough. Companies don't lean into their internal workforce like they did in the 60s and 70s. Ever since the early 1980s, the reality has been that companies are happier to recruit from outside the business and see their workforce as more transactional. So we're not really a company man anymore. We're not really someone who works somewhere for 30 years and gets a gold watch. That just doesn't happen anymore. So that transactional nature means that it's more likely they're going to want to hire from outside than hire from within. Because if you think about it, when a company hires from within, when they promote, that means they're going to put someone into a new role that they're not quite ready for, because that's the nature of moving up. When you get promoted into a role, you have to learn the new role. But you also leave a gap behind you, and you were probably very, very good at what you did, and now they've got to fill that with someone who's not as good as you were. And so companies don't think about the long-term relationship between the employee and the employer as much as they used to. Now it's about, I have this employee who's great at this job. I'm going to keep her right there for as long as she'll tolerate because she's great at her job. I have no interest in promoting her. I want her to stay right where she is because it makes my job easier to not think about it. And this is the reality. This is why getting promoted is just way harder than it used to be. So what can you do about it? Well, one thing you can do is you can job hop. And job hopping sounds like it's kind of a bad thing, but it's not. Let me explain. We live in a transactional economy. The way that we work in the United States specifically, but how the corporate world works is they see the labor pool as transactional. They have no concern about letting you go. The layoffs happening around Christmas, I mean, what the hell? Given up on the idea of loyalty from the company to the employee. And so I think it's important that we understand as employees that that means that we should not be giving the same loyalty that we used to these companies. If they can lay you off at any moment, you can walk away at any moment, and you should be ready to do that. So I don't love to use the word job hopping. What I like to talk about instead is building yourself a network and creating an entire funnel of opportunities that come to you that allow you to choose which opportunities and projects and companies and roles that you want to take on. And I think if you think about things from a more transactional perspective, where you're just going from place to place, doing a thing from time to time, that actually takes away the connection that we feel to the organization we're working for. Yes, but it also prepares you for the reality that most corporations are probably going to lay off. If they're a certain size, if they're publicly traded, if you work for a big brand, you're transactional to them. They don't care because the shareholders drive everything now. The CEOs do whatever they can to make the shareholders happy because the shareholders give them compensation tied to the stock. And so whatever make the stocks goes up, that's what they care about. And they don't care about whether or not the company has quality employees that have been around for 30 years anymore. So you have to let go of that feeling that we used to have about companies that we worked with and for. It needs to be more transactional in your mind. And so what does that mean? That means that you need to have constantly a network of people looking for opportunities for you. You need to make sure that you promote yourself in a way that people see you as something that can work in multiple environments and different organizations throughout your industry and even beyond. So how do you move up in 2025? Well, my first piece of advice here is if you want to move from 100K to 150K, then you need to get yourself out there on LinkedIn. And you need to treat LinkedIn more like Amazon than Facebook. LinkedIn is a necessary evil in 2025. The reality is, I don't love LinkedIn, but it is the place to find talent, is the place to find talent. And that means that you need to think of LinkedIn more like Amazon. And you are the product. You need to be selling yourself, promoting yourself, marketing yourself online so that people you don't know find you. And then you want those people to see that you have something to offer that's different than maybe somebody in their own organization. That you want them to come up with a role that's specifically tailored to you. You want them to be thinking about, well, I have this problem in my company, and here's a person who's talking about how to solve that problem. Let me get her into an interview and see if we can create a role for her to come in and solve this problem. It's more transactional, and it's more kind of like there's this colder connection between companies and us as employees, and we have to get used to that. And so that means that you have to think of yourself as you Inc., right? You have to market and sell yourself. The marketing is LinkedIn, the selling is interviewing. And if you think of yourself as having a marketing and sales department that's always running, right? Like always running, even when you have your dream job, you should be always running your marketing and sales efforts, because you never know when something even better comes along or when this great thing falls apart because of something you didn't know was happening. The other thing you can do is make sure that your company, your leadership team knows that you want to move up inside of your organization. Let them understand that you're on a ticking clock now. You are ready to take the next step in your career. And do they have that next step available for you? Yes or no? If they don't, they need to understand that it's not likely you're going to be here for another 12, 18, 24 months doing the same job, that you're ready for growth. And if they don't have that growth opportunity for you, you're going to find it elsewhere. We have to take back control of the narrative and not be afraid of losing our job. They need to be equally afraid of losing great talent. And so you have to put yourself in this mindset of someone who has the confidence to walk into your boss's office and say, hey, I want your job. I'm ready for your job. And how do I get that, right? How do I do something at your level? I'm a manager. I want to be a director. How do we do that? Is there a role for me? Is there a thing that we can carve out? All of that is like a conversation that you have to be comfortable having in order to move up inside of your organization. And the larger the organization, the more likely there's some diagonal promotions outside of your particular organization available to you, right? Smaller organizations, there's not going to be as much growth opportunity. So just understand that. And finally, I really think it's important that you find resources, communities, and coaches who know how to do these things, that you can learn the shortcuts, because it took me a long time to figure all of this out. It takes other people a long time to learn what they need to do. And the other thing is that, like, where were you a year ago? Were you in the same place? Were you thinking to yourself, January 1, 2024, I should get promoted this year? Did that happen? Did you get a raise of like 10, 15% to match inflation? Did you get a raise at all? Think about where you were and think about where you are and think about where you'll be 12 months from now. If you start working on growing your career now, in 12 months, you can be in an incredibly different place. It helps to have people who give you structure, discipline, and accountability to show up and do the things that you need to do. There's also great value in having a trusted process that actually works. So you should be working with coaches who have a process that works. And there are plenty of coaches besides me that are out there that have great systems and communities just like we do. So find a coach that you resonate with, work with them, make the investment in yourself, because that investment should pay itself back 4, 5, 6, 10x ROI every year, year over year. If you put $10,000 into executive career coaching and in 6 months you're making 50 grand a year more, that's a 5x ROI just in your first year, and then 10x the second year, 15x the third, right? It just continues to grow. You get past the point that you're stuck at right now. So consider working with some coaches to take the next step. So yeah, 150K a year is kind of the waterline these days. 100K a year just doesn't cut it anymore. And if you want to move from 150K up to 200K, if you want to move up to 300K, if you want to move to those levels, figure out how you move yourself up in your career and you see yourself as being more transactional in the ways that you work with organizations. Be willing and comfortable to let go of the organization that you work for so that you can find the right opportunities. And you can also stay inside of corporations and grow vertically inside of your company. It just may take longer. And if you're willing to sacrifice the time and money to grow inside of your organization because you love the company, that's an absolutely reasonable path. But if you're stuck at 100K and you don't know how to get to 150K, there are ways to do it. And there's a great process that we teach in our program. It's called the Whole Executive Framework that kind of lays this all out. And so if you learn more about that, check the link down below in the description. That's what I got for you. I think it's time to take stock of your income and what can you do to get yourself up and out of the level that starts to feel more and more like it's below the waterline. So that's what I got for you today. I hope this was a good video for you, and I'll see you in the next one.